What a big surprise, guys! Russia literally donates its tanks to Ukraine, and then Russian paratroopers destroy their last remaining tanks. It is estimated that approximately $13.5 million worth of tanks was lost in the most ridiculous way possible. And then another major Russian convoy was ambushed in the south. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some Russians literally donating their tanks to Ukraine and Ukrainians taking them and using against Russians themselves. No ridiculous Russian propaganda today, but do not worry. There will be ridiculous stuff within this episode. And so yes, speaking about Ukrainians using Russian military vehicles against them, it is pretty much a commonly known fact which has been happening since the beginning of this war. But earlier this year, Ukrainians also started literally seizing Russian tanks and using them, and just one of the very first times it actually happened was on Kupiansk front line. This tank reportedly was captured by Ukrainians during their Kharkov rapid liberation last year and is still being used reportedly until today, also in the areas such as in the close proximity to Bakhmut. Besides that, more recently Russians abandoned another of their tanks next to Robotyne in Zaporozhye front line, and this one is already extremely valuable, because this one is T-90M Prorыв, one of the most modern and expensive tanks of the Russian army. And Ukrainians already renamed it to Skala, which basically means the mountain, and they're already also using it in their counteroffensive against Robotyne itself. And here is your fun fact for today. As of right now, it is estimated that Ukrainians exceeded Russians in the number of tanks, approximately 1500 versus 1400. But in the beginning of the war, Russians had more than 3 times the number of tanks. So the question is, how Ukrainians were able to do it? First of all, it is because thanks to the Western military partners who are constantly sending tanks to Ukraine, such as for example Leopards 1 and 2. But then it is also Russians themselves. As soon as there's any mechanical problem with the tank, or it gets damaged with the drone or a missile attack, but it is still relatively functional, they just simply abandon it, and Ukrainians pick up the tanks, repair if needed, and use it against Russians. So yeah, it started as Russians dominating in a tank battlefield, and now it is pretty much equal. And obviously, one of the main reasons why the number of Russian tanks decreased so much, it is because Ukrainians simply destroy them. So let's talk about this right now really quick, before talking about Russians destroying their own tanks as well. And in the meantime, if you don't mind, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you like this style of daily updating. You can also follow me on Instagram to see how I live outside of YouTube. The link is down below. And so yes, among a lot of destroyed Russian tanks recently started appearing T-90Ms, once again the most modern and expensive Russian tanks, such as for example this one right here, allegedly from the eastern front lines. Then there is another T-90 which is completely obliterated by Ukrainians. There is like literally pretty much nothing left of it after the big boom. Let's call it like this because YouTube will demonetize me if I say the word which you are thinking. And the funny thing about this is that Russians actually took this video and they said that this is the army of Palestine destroying Israel tanks. This is pretty much their another desperate attempt to take away the attention from their own Russian-Ukrainian war and switch it to Israel-Palestinian war, hoping that Ukraine will stop receiving as much military support. But it does not end here. Right here is yet another T-90M Russian tank in Marinka, which has also been destroyed. But you know what? Ukrainians do not even need to use extremely expensive missiles to do it. Sometimes only a few drones is enough. And yes, also against T-90Ms, such as for example this one in Andriivka has been destabilized and then eliminated only using 3 inexpensive drones with the value of, I don't know, several hundred or maybe $1,000, destroying a tank worth estimatedly at $4.5 million. This is a pretty good investment by Ukrainians, not gonna lie. And you know what? Here is another interesting statistics for you guys. It is reported that Russia only has approximately 100 such tanks, or at least used to have them before the war, and as you can see, a lot of them are being destroyed and specifically targeted by Ukrainians. And Russians, once again, whenever they are slightly damaged or whenever Russians are afraid, they simply abandon them, making the situation even worse for them. But wait, there is more. Even more Russian T-90Ms have been destroyed by Ukrainians using simple drones, such as, for example, as you can see from this video, in the close proximity to Bakhmut. And then sometimes whenever Russians they do abandon these tanks and Ukrainians cannot retrieve them because Russians are kinda taking this area under artillery control, so Ukrainians decide that okay, let's just detonate it itself as well, so it's not belonging neither to Russians nor to us. And here is your ridiculous Russian propaganda part within the episode itself, because Russians reportedly lost 3 T-90Ms in a row in a single day, worth estimatedly up to $13.5 million, and the way they lost them is completely ridiculous. So, what basically happened is, close to Liman front line, first Russian T-90M tank, he went driving forward, and then it caught one of the mines, pretty much destabilizing and immobilizing it. Russians abandoned it and retreated. Then there was another T-90M tank following like, hey bro, what's happened? Let me try and see what's happening, I need just to get a little bit closer to you. Guess what? It also got caught in a mine and became immobilized. Russian soldiers retreated and abandoned the tank. And you just cannot make things up, but then it was the third T-90M tank, which was like, what's up you two guys, why are you standing there? Let me check what's going on. And literally, it also went next to them, caught a mine, became immobilized, and got abandoned by the Russian soldiers. You just cannot create this ridiculous story without it actually happening, because it did. But this is not even the most ridiculous thing, because guys, prepare, Russians themselves, they destroy their last remaining tanks for some very interesting reasons. Let's talk about this right now. And what basically happened is that Russian paratroopers, they recorded this combat footage video, creating a superhero story about them, going behind the front lines, approaching Ukrainians from behind, eliminating the entire infantry, and then destroying Ukrainian T-72B tank. But if you look closely, in slow motion, you can see that this is actually a Russian tank, because it has this Z symbol on its side. Basically what happened is that paratroopers decided to destroy their own tank, film this video, create this heroic story, maybe get some recognition and awards from their military commandment, but they ended up bamboozling themselves, so there is nothing else for me to say other than congratulations, you played yourself. And to make things even worse for the Russian army, Ukrainians, besides tanks, they're also able to ambush and wipe out an extremely important and crucial convoy of Russians in the south. According to the General Staff of Ukraine, the intelligence data about this upcoming convoy in the Zaporozhye region, they started collecting it maybe several weeks ago, and they knew exactly when it will start going towards Robotyne, bringing reinforcements to Russians. And pretty much en route along the way, Ukrainians already knew everything, so it was pretty easy target for them, so they completely obliterated it. And it is estimated that at least 5 infantry fighting vehicles and 2 trucks full of arms and ammunition were completely destroyed and lost by Russians, along with some infantry protecting it. And just once again, this was an extremely crucial convoy for Russians, because they were bringing reinforcements to Robotyne, the area where Ukrainians are actively advancing. Slowly but surely, but they do advance almost every single day, and when the pressure of Ukrainians is pretty much the strongest. And obviously, Russians, they needed these supplies to just protect themselves, not let Ukrainians advance. And so right now, as you can see, their situation is far from being envious. Russians right now in Robotyne are protecting with whatever they have left, and most likely Ukrainians will be able to breach these defenses in the near future as well. And yet another interesting fact is that the original destination of this military convoy was headed from Tokmak to Robotyne, which just once again confirms the fact that Russians consider Tokmak as their next major line of defense, and just once again, as soon as the current one is breached, most likely Russians will retreat to the city, so we might see a pretty sizable territory being liberated by Ukrainians very soon. And just always, if you don't want to miss it, can you please consider subscribing to my channel? This will be a very important update for me to give you. I don't want you to miss it, so please go ahead and do it. Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much my patrons for your support, and see you tomorrow.